Hello, Astrology Abolitionist friends. I am recording this on August 13th, 2024 at 11:18 p.m. Pacific time. And I am aiming to send this out in an email to you by 8:21 a.m. on August 14th. And my reasoning for this is that will be the exact moment of the Mars and Jupiter conjunction in Gemini. A conjunction is when two planets come to the exact same point, the exact same degree, in the exact same sign at the same time. So at 8:21 a.m. Pacific time, so that'll be 9:21 Mountain Time, 10:21 Central, so on and so on. At that time, Mars and Jupiter are going to be at 16 degrees and 40 arc minutes of Gemini. So if you know, or if you have a copy of your chart, or if you can pull up your chart, or if you know what is going on in Gemini in your chart, then you'll kind of have an idea of where this might be activating for you. So for example, for me, at around 16 degrees of Gemini, I have actually my sun placement is at 22 degrees approximately of Gemini. So I know that there's going to be a bit of an activation when it comes to my sense of identity, when it comes to my almost my strength, the way that I feel alive or vital. And I also know that Gemini rules my 5th house, so I know that this conjunction is really going to activate the area of my life that is anything that is fun, creativity, playfulness, children, these kinds of things. And that's a very basic, sort of surface level example of how transits can kind of work with our natal chart, so that we can get a bit more specific about how these things might be showing up for us as individuals. Of course, my suggestion is always to look at the chart in full. It's not enough to just look at one point or one place, but to also have a holistic idea of what's going on in terms of all the different aspects and all the different things that are going on, etc., etc. That's my little plug. But if we're just going to talk about the Mars and Jupiter conjunction briefly, not too briefly, because it's a pretty big deal. I think most astrologers are saying this is something that we've probably been feeling for the last week or so. Jupiter stays in one sign in Gemini for a year, so it moves relatively slowly. Mars is a faster planet compared to Jupiter, so it is going to kind of zip by Jupiter, zip through Gemini, while Jupiter continues to move a little bit slower in Gemini. And some of the keywords that we can use for Mars would be Mars is the warrior. Mars wants to separate, it wants to define, it wants to take action. It usually is going to give us like a push of motivation, something that Mars is the thing that gets us to move, it gets us to do. It doesn't want us to think as much as it wants us to act. And something I've been thinking about a lot is how the archetype of Mars, of course we can think about it. We think, when we think about war, for example, the way it plays out in the world is obviously very violent and very oppressive and very harmful. However, the quality of Mars, just in and of itself, is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, we need the quality of Mars in our lives, because if we didn't have it, then we wouldn't be able to state what it is that we believe in and what it is that we will stand for. So anytime that we are standing up for a cause, when we're standing up for something we believe in, when we're taking actions that align with our beliefs, that's Mars. Of course, also, when we react in ways that are not aligned with our values, for example, if I act out in a way that is actually very biased, or if I act out in a way that I may realize later was actually very punitive, or coming from a place of whiteness, if we're talking about white supremacy as something that trains us to act a certain way, and if I am coming from that place, then it might not actually be aligned with my values as an abolitionist. However, Mars can sometimes be this thing that tells us to act no matter what, without thinking about if it's actually aligned with our values. So having a well adapted, I guess, or a conscious Mars, or having a good relationship with our Mars quality is something that I've been thinking about a lot, because I just feel like there are, I think if we look around in the world, obviously there are a lot of, I'm just gonna say, like, big, puffy, rich dudes and people who are very, aligned with white supremacist, anti-black, patriarchal, gross systems, who are running around, using this Mars energy to fucking colonize and destroy and wreak havoc in this world, on the planet, on the people. But the Mars energy is also something that we can use as abolitionists in our work to act when we feel something is not just. It's something that we can use as motivation along the way when we are having conflicts in our movements, when we are needing to stir up people's imaginations, when we are needing to rally around a cause. And I'm going to say some keywords for Jupiter. So in general, Jupiter is a planet that wants to think about what is possible. I'd say Jupiter is a very it's an expansive planet, but it's like it wants to bring like growth and abundance and all of that. But I've also just been thinking about Jupiter as like, how does it feel like, and this is for me as a person who comes from a body-based practice and dance and movement. I'm always thinking about how does it actually feel to embody Jupiter. And Jupiter is very, I would say it has a more fluid quality. It wants to, it sounds kind of weird, but like it's wet. it wants to expand in this, like water does. Jupiter in the solar system has like the most moons. It's the biggest one. It has biggest planet in our solar system. It has the most gravity. It's kind of big and like bold and always kind of the loudest one in the room. So again, thinking about the nuances of Jupiter, it's about belief. It's about what is it that we believe in. I feel like Jupiter isn't always like totally grounded in reality, which like can be a really good thing. Like, as abolitionists, I feel we do have this kind of hope or faith or belief that there can be something better, that it is possible that a different world could exist, even if it's not in our lifetime, that there is the possibility of something different. And so we do need Jupiter. And both of these planets are in Gemini, which I have a very personal connection with the sign of Gemini, having a Gemini sun. Gemini is all about ideas, all about the sharing of ideas. I think that Gemini as a sign is actually a very equity focused sign. Gemini literally wants to see every perspective. Like Gemini archetype is not going to be satisfied with somebody just saying, this is the way it's done. This is the one perspective that we all have subscribed to. Gemini is like, oh, okay, but what about this? And what about that? And what about that? And Gemini will literally wants to know every single perspective and wants to understand like why. And Gemini, to a fault, wants to also understand the perspectives that it doesn't even necessarily agree with. And the reasoning for Gemini wanting to understand all these different perspectives is so that it can bounce these ideas around enough that it can come to a place of transforming from one state to another. Because Gemini wants to move us from one place to the next. So wherever we are, Gemini wants to use this process of sharing ideas and bouncing and Gemini will just constantly talk a situation around and around and around until it becomes distilled, until it transforms. And it's a very social process. Gemini, like, it's very mental, very intellectual, can almost feel a little bit impersonal because it's not so much concerned with emotions. It's more about ideas. So if you think about a group of people standing around throwing out ideas and throwing them around and brainstorming and not really like having too much judgment about those ideas, but just throwing them around and letting them kind of take shape on their own, that, to me, that's Gemini. Gemini wants to, like, at all costs, we need to move ideas to the next phase. The ideas cannot stay the same. The ideas cannot be stagnant. They need to move to the next phase of whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing. So I think that there are a lot of possibilities when it comes to this conjunction. There's a lot of possibilities for us as abolitionists to use this sort of boost of energy, this boost of possibly belief, and it feels positive. Like, it feels like a positive a positive swell of energy. The swell, like a wave that comes up from the ocean, and we're going with it, right? And it's probably something that we've noticed already, that there are some things happening this week that have maybe been building in terms of ideas moving from one phase to the next, where we just feel like there's a bit of an extra push to move towards greater alignment and to grow. I think that's the Jupiter of it, is that Jupiter does want us to keep moving. It feels like there's a lot of movement. Mars has movement, Jupiter has movement, Gemini has movement. I feel like that could be a very useful thing for us. And at the same time, we know that this energy also could be moving the movements that are opposing us into greater harm and greater oppression and greater violence. And so I think, and I mean, the other part of it too that we have to know is that Mercury is retrograde right now. Mercury governs or rules Gemini, so it is part of this. And tomorrow, on the same day as this Mars-Jupiter conjunction, there's also a Mercury. So Mercury has been retrograde in Virgo, and on August 14th, tomorrow, at 5:15 p.m. Pacific time, 6:15 Mountain time, Mercury is going to enter back into Leo. So it was in Leo before it went retrograde, and then it entered into Virgo, and then it went retrograde, and now it's going back along all the degrees that it already went through. So there's a shift. Mercury is going from very analytical, very detail-oriented, very sharp Virgo to a more warm, extroverted, possibly bold Leo. So this could be interesting. There could be a shift in the way people are communicating. I think Mercury always is going to govern the way our mental processes go and the way our communication goes. So there's a possibility that things could become possibly more heart-centered, Leo being more heart-centered than Virgo. Virgo is more mind-centered and can be overthinking and overanalyzing things, and thinking too much into the details and going over things that don't need to be going on over all the time. And at the same time, it's good to catch details. Like, there's a positive to it as well. But if there's anything where we've been feeling like an overload of details, it's possible that this Mercury going back into Leo is going to bring a bit more of a heart-centered approach. At the same time, Leo just kind of, I would say, is less careful about the way it expresses. Like, Virgo is much more calculated about the way it expresses, and Leo's just like all heart and all like, sun and courage and loyal, like if we think of the lion, that expression could end up being sort of egotistic in a way as well. Like, I don't care what anyone thinks, I'm just gonna say it kind of vibes. So again, we can use this to our advantage in any situation where we think, you know, it might be better to come from a more I don't want to say careless, but Virgo is so careful though. Virgo's so careful about the words it chooses. It's so nitpicky about the words it chooses. And Leo's not going to be as severe and as picky about words. It's going to be more about vibes. So if there's any situations where you're needing to have like a conversation, and it needs to come from more of a heart-centered place, the next 2 weeks as Mercury goes through Leo, that could be something that shifts. We shall see. Mercury is still retrograde though, so we do need to just continue, as we probably already have been. It's like just expecting that there will be communication difficulties, there will be technology difficulties. There are going to be things that are communicated, things that we have thought through during this time, that after Mercury goes direct, there will be things that we will have missed. Just because Mercury retrograde is a time where things are more confusing, it's a little bit harder to see what is really happening, and everyone's kind of in it. So even if we're thinking we're having super honest conversations, it's possible that there are going to be things that will be missed that we will find after the Mercury retrograde. And that's just kind of the way it is. It's annoying. It's very annoying, but I feel like the purpose of Mercury retrograde, because there is a purpose of it, is that during this time, we're supposed to be going very internal, and we still have to live our lives. We still have to talk to people, and like, especially in our movements, we have to continue communicating with one another and talking to one another and moving things forward. But just being really mindful that we're taking the time for ourselves to go inward and really reflect on how we're speaking and how we're talking to each other, and noticing. I think something I notice with Mercury retrograde a lot is that I get a little bit more defensive about things, or I feel hurt by things. And I'm not talking about like actual harms where people are actually harming me or, you know, being actually violent. I'm talking about like little things, like me being like, oh, that person just said that. Was that about me? I don't know if that was about me. Did they have a tone? Was there a tone that I missed in there? Did I fuck that up? Was that my fault? That kind of stuff. That's really more in my head than it is actually real. So for me, it's really about taking the time to like notice those things in myself, check in, okay, was that real or was that not? Usually during a Mercury retrograde, there's just going to be a little bit more of that. And if we can take the time to reflect on those things when we come out of the Mercury retrograde, we're actually going to be stronger. So we're actually going to be better, I think, more skilled at that kind of process. And then the cool thing about Mercury retrograde is it goes back and then it goes forward again, obviously. It goes forward again through the same part of our chart. So again, if you know in your chart what houses or what planets or what placements there are in the early stages of Virgo and the later stages of Leo, then you kind of have an idea too of what Mercury is working over in your life. and how it may be manifesting, how it might be coming up. This is just an area of your life that's needing to be reviewed in terms of the communication and in terms of the way you are mentally processing. Mercury is also our nervous system. It's definitely, I feel more anxiety. And just like, not anxiety that's really related to anything, just kind of like, because like anxiety is also a thing that we just feel when bad things are happening, or like, I think that's just kind of the world is the world as it is, and for some more than others is just a place that is going to produce anxiety because it is this way. We know that. Again, as abolitionists, that's something that we know, is that this world is not set up in a way. This world is kind of set up to put us in a state of anxiety all the time. But Mercury retrograde is just more of a time when that anxiety may come up more, and not necessarily connected to anything that's actually happening. It's just something that we're feeling more because our nervous systems are activated more. And because, like I said, like things are going wrong and we're forgetting things, and like technology is not going well, and everyone's getting kind of like, wow, everyone's kind of on edge. So the other big thing that is happening this week, literally the day after tomorrow, on the 15th, on August 15th, let's see, at 10:30 p.m. Pacific time, or 11:30 p.m. Mountain time, so it'll actually be Friday the 16th at 12:30 a.m. or 1:30 a.m. if you are Central or Eastern. At this time, Mars is going to be squaring Saturn. And it's important because Mars, literally, like on the first day, the 14th, is conjunct Jupiter, and then literally the next day it is squaring Saturn. So it's a lot coming from Mars in like a 48-hour, 24-hour kind of period. And when Mars squares Saturn, it has a bit of an opposite, I'd say, effect to the Mars conjunct Jupiter. And that's because Saturn is more of a constricting quality than Jupiter. So Jupiter wants to expand and Saturn wants to constrict and limit. And we need that. We need Saturn. We need Saturn to kind of rein us in. We need Saturn to kind of show us, okay, you've gone way off track here. You need to come back. Come back over here. I feel like Saturn, for us as abolitionists, is about how do we create structure in our movements? How do we create structure in the way that we practice abolitionism even? I think that Saturn kind of tells us like, hey, you've gone off track. You're not super aligned right now. You need to get back on the beam. And it doesn't feel great, it doesn't feel great when we have to course correct. I think that's what the Mars square Saturn is doing for us, is it's asking us to course correct wherever we have gotten off. So it's going to feel a little limiting and a little bit blocked and a little bit like the possibilities and the motivation that we found on Wednesday are possibly being thwarted, or there's some kind of boundary coming up. And so the next big moment that I want to address is the 19th, Monday, August 19th, we have our big, beautiful full moon in Aquarius. And the exact moment of that full moon is actually during the day at 11:25 a.m. Pacific, 12:25 p.m. Mountain. In the afternoon, 2:25 p.m. Eastern. That will be the exact moment of the full moon. And the moon, so the moon, when we look up in the sky on Sunday the 18th, it will be full, because it will be about 12 hours like before the exact moment. And then Monday night the 19th, it will also look full. If you are planning on doing any kind of full moon rituals, my suggestion is to do that on the 18th, because that is when the energy is approaching the full moon and it is at its greater strength. But just notice that Monday morning is going to be a very energetic time. Sunday night is going to be a very energetic time. Monday morning is going to be very energetic, and then the peak of it will be around noon if you are Pacific or Mountain. And it's already going to start dissipating by Monday evening. So a full moon is always going to be about what are we letting go of? What do we need to release? We feel a lot of energy around this time because everything is building, and we start to feel really in our bodies and in our emotions what it is that needs to be let go of during this cycle. And this full moon, of course, is in Aquarius, which I feel is the revolutionary of the zodiac, in my humble opinion. I feel Aquarius is very concerned with the collective, very, very committed to how are we shifting the structures from being traditional to something new, something innovative. And so for us as abolitionists, as people who are trying to build a world of collective liberation, Aquarius is an energy that we can really tap into. And I feel that a full moon in Aquarius is really going to show us really clearly what is not working for the collective. And I think we're probably all very aware in general of what is not working for the collective, what's not working for the people. But if there's anything that's going on where we need to get clear about anything specific, if there's anything specific that we're wondering about, is it this or is it that? What are the little sort of decisions that need to be made, that we need to let go of? And it could be things within us. What do we need to let go of within us? Do we need to let go of an old idea of what we thought our collective work was going to look like? Do we need to let go of... I feel that Aquarius actually wants us to let go of some of our personal stuff in favor of the collective. And I think that if we are doing that, centering those that are most marginalized, that can be helpful. Aquarius is an air sign, so it is very much about ideas. Again, mental processing. It's going to be very intellectual. So where is our intellect helpful, and where is our intellect not helpful in building collective movements? And of course, this full moon is accompanied by a big, beautiful square between Jupiter and Saturn, which is happening at 2:46 p.m. Pacific time, or 3:46 Mountain, 5:46 Eastern. So literally, we've just had, all these planets are very busy right now. So we had Mars conjunct Jupiter, then we had Mars square Saturn, and then later in the week we have a Jupiter square Saturn. So these three planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, are very activated right now, all with this beautiful full moon, which is ruled by Saturn. Aquarius is ruled by the planet Saturn. And again, I think I'll finish with this, even though that doesn't even bring us to the end of the month, but I think these are sort of the biggest things we're going to be dealing with, because these will have lasting effects, not only till the end of the month, but there will be lasting effects from this week. The things that we deal with this week are going to be lasting for the next year, quite honestly, because Saturn is retrograde and it is going to be going back over these places in our charts, these degrees. It's going back over it again over the next year, really, give or take. And because Jupiter is in Gemini for another 6 months or more, and then Mars is going to be going into its retrograde later in the year, and it's going to be coming back, not quite to where it is now, but it's going to be coming back. Anyways, I digress. The Jupiter-Saturn square, like if the Mars square Saturn didn't do it, the Jupiter square Saturn will do it, in the sense of it is really going to show us where we have gotten off track. It's really going to highlight what needs to be gathered together, what needs to be tidied up. Whenever two planets are square each other, it forces us to move. It forces us to take action. If Jupiter is our values and our belief systems, and it wants to make things bigger, and Saturn is the structures and the realities that we deal with, and it is more about probability, like what is realistic, what is probable, and Jupiter is, well, what is possible, the dream. We're having to face what these two planets are offering. We're having to face a truth, I feel. Because yes, we have this big, beautiful dream, but how does that actually manifest in the reality that we are in here now, in these bodies, in these places that we are in? And I'm hoping that this square, Jupiter to Saturn, it feels like it's something that could possibly tip things a little bit in our favor as people who are seeking a revolution, who are looking to topple the systems that are currently in power. And the reason I feel that is because Jupiter and Saturn are also two of the planets that are very concerned with the economy. They tend to, because Jupiter is a planet that kind of represents what we value, and Saturn again represents like the laws of the man-made world, if that makes sense. So it feels like with a Jupiter square Saturn, there's a chance or an opportunity for the continued revelation that those who are in power are not what they want us to think that they are, and that there's maybe a chance for some kind of fall or some kind of showing publicly where things are off. And I think the more people that we can have see this and see it over and over and over again, the better for our movements. And like, we don't even have to do anything for that to happen, because we know they're revealing themselves every day. They're showing who they are every day. We don't, we know, we see it. So as we continue to use this energy to tighten up the way we work together, the hope is that these energies continue to topple what they're doing. And by they, I mean the people who hold the power. And anyone who holds more power than us. I think that's a distinction to make too, is that yes, you know, there's the billionaires and the politicians and the leaders of nations who we want to see fall, but there's also the people who just have a little bit more access and privilege. Maybe the people who are working in nonprofits, or the people who have a little bit of family resources. And they might not be like the elite rich who are going to make, you know, the big decisions and all of that. But they have a little bit more than possibly we do, as people who are really trying to redistribute, or people who are marginalized in our own ways. And so there's a chance, I think, with this Jupiter square Saturn, for people to kind of be woken up. For example, if there are people out there who are for a free Palestine, but they haven't yet made the connection that there are genocides happening all over the world, especially in places like Congo and Sudan. People who haven't made that connection, that it is anti-blackness at the root of all these oppressions. People who haven't made the connection to abolitionism. People who think that the police can be reformed from the inside out, that they just need to be defunded, not abolished. There's a chance that there could be a revelation for them. And it might not happen. It's not going to happen right away. We all know that. But when I look at this transit, I think that's part of it too, is that, like, what is our belief? Yes, hope is not enough. But in order for us to keep going, we do have to have some kind of belief that things could change. That belief has to be backed up by action and reality. And what are we doing? But we also need to have the belief, we need to have the hope that fuels us. Alright, I'm going to leave it there. I think 44 minutes is more than enough to talk about 1 week of very intense astrology. And please reach out if you have any questions, if you would like to put some time aside for either us to meet up and talk about your natal chart in relation to these transits, I would love to do that, and I would love even just to talk about any of this more with you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for supporting this practice of mine. I feel very honored that I get to do this, and I will see you around. Bye.